Yeah, let's get this up.
Ever completed by an Irish political party. This ratified both the programme for government and our agreement to seeking a new way for government to operate. From the first moment, each party gave its commitment to respecting agreements and to implementing our programme across the full term of this Dáil. We were determined that time would not be wasted on the old political game of speculation about election dates, and instead to focus on the substance of implementing our programme of action. No party or deputy in this House has a mandate to claim to represent the views of all Irish people or to demand exclusive control of public policies for themselves. There are those in this House who scorn at the idea of centrist politics. To them, the purity of ideology is comforting, and they show this by never having any doubt about in their own views and the certainty of their own views, or in the fact that they alone represent the Irish people, whether or not the Irish people agree with that proposition. However, a distinguishing feature of centrist democracy is the ability to respect differences, find points of agreement, and to cooperate. And this is what we have done. This government was formed in the middle of the greatest public health crisis in modern times, and with over 500,000 people out of work. It overcame tremendous pressure during its first 2 years, and by any objective standard, saved lives and livelihoods in every community in this country. We have worked together on a programme of investment in a wide range of public services to assist people during a worldwide inflation crisis and to respond to what is by any measure a moment of great threat to the future of democracy in Europe. We are three separate parties, but seek to work together, respecting both our differences and an agreed approach to the most urgent issues facing our country. Following his election as leader of Fine Gael, I, along with Deputy Eamon Ryan, held a lengthy discussion with Deputy Harris concerning the operation of government and our shared commitments to our agreed programme. And I'm happy to say that this was a very constructive and positive discussion. Deputy Harris confirmed his commitment to implementing our agreements and to the operation of this multi-party government in a manner which respects each of its components and operates in a consensual and constructive manner. Fianna Fáil will be supporting the proposal to nominate Deputy Simon Harris as leader of his party to the President for appointment to the office of Taoiseach. It is an unfortunate reality that much of the opposition has committed itself to a type of politics which is obsessed with fake outrage and attacking everything. The display we have seen in recent weeks about the election of a new Taoiseach has become more strained and absurd every day. Repeatedly, we have heard the claim that this is somehow undemocratic and that there should be an election every time a new Taoiseach has to be elected. Now, I know that there are many opposite who've only very recently become reconciled to recognising and respecting Bunreacht na hÉireann. But our constitution could not be clearer. Each member of this Dáil carries a mandate for a full term, and the choice of all office holders can change throughout this mandate. I must confess that I've been amazed by the brazenness of the largest opposition party on this matter. I will be seeking support at the Sinn Féin convention. Has long been one of the emptiest and meaningless phrases ever uttered. Of relevance today is that while it is attacking the democratic legitimacy of this vote, it has a unique record of privately appointing and replacing leaders without ever holding an internal election, let alone a public one. In fact, today, no opposition party, large or small, has a leader who went through a competitive election before assuming the role. We will have more time at Ceann Comhairle during the debate on the nomination of ministers to discuss substantive policy matters and the range of work which will be our focus during the rest of this Dáil's mandate. And we have a significant piece of work to do over the next 12 months, and we are determined to do it. At this critical moment, where we face often dramatic challenges at home and internationally, instead of questioning the democratic legitimacy of this vote, we should be grateful for the fact that we have a robust democracy and a strong and resilient parliamentary democracy, which we should do everything to uphold and to support and not to undermine. On a personal level, I would like to congratulate Deputy Harris, his wife Caoimhe, his family and his supporters, and particularly Saoirse and Cillian. For them, it will be a day that they'll remember differently as time evolves, but it's a very special moment for them and for Mary and Bart as well. And because all of us here, we all know that nobody can succeed in making a real impact in our public life by ourselves. And just like the tough times are shared, I think so too are moments such as these. And I wish our family the greatest of enjoyment of this moment and of this day, because I've no doubt in the immediate aftermath, things might get a bit more challenging and rockier. I wish you well. It's a special day for you, and I look forward to a constructive and to effective cooperation in the time ahead. God amíle maithagad agus go nairóig an tálaat. Go míle go.
I would just start, first of all, by thanking Leo Varadkar for the work he has done, particularly in the last 4 years, but also over the time in this Dáil. He leaves a record as leader of Taoiseach of the country when our economy has never been stronger. And I think history will judge that the way, Leo, your timing in how you manage Brexit with the British government, knowing when there was the time for a deal and what that deal would be, will stand the real recognition. And similarly, that critical moment early in 2020, when fear about COVID was so strong in the land, your words to reassure people at that time showed real leadership. And that record will travel with you, whatever you do next. I'm absolutely convinced, as the Taoiseach says, you continue to have a role in public life. What you said this morning, I just heard, which was true, about leading a coalition of equals is very important. Because that ability to know it's not just about the numbers, it is about the ideas. It's about being open to persuasion. It's about being able to compromise and work collectively is hugely important. There's another person I've seen over the 20 years more I've been here is Simon Coveney. We started together, well, you were there before me, but on the Joint Trucks Committee on climate, energy, thinking about technology, how we improve the lives of our people by thinking long term. And similarly, I remember that very difficult period during the financial crash when really it couldn't have got harder. I remember keeping in touch with Simon where there was connection between opposition and government. It was the public interest you were thinking of, not just your party's interests. And I remember, Brendan Howland will recall this, Mary Lou, you will too. During that Brexit period, how often did we go into Ivy House? Almost monthly, where Simon wanted an absolute open, transparent basis, not just us, but also trade unions, NGOs, academics, business community. He was an open book in operating a partnership model of government. We do social partnership in this country to share what was happening, to listen to what the best thinking might be. That partnership approach is the one that works, the one that delivers for our country. And this government is committed to it for the remaining 10 months that we have been given the mandate under the Constitution to do. And I hear others saying, oh no, we have to have election now. I fundamentally disagree, because there's work to be done that we can deliver. Darragh O'Brien has turned things around in housing where the numbers there do not lie. There has been a dramatic increase, and that can continue and will continue. Similarly, I would argue, Stephen Donnelly, any honest assessment of the outcomes for delivery to improving the health qualities of our people would show again a record of improvement that we need to continue laser focus, because that's what's important for our people. And similarly, as the Taoiseach says, we are starting to turn and show real leadership in climate as a people. We are good at this. We're starting to see the emissions last year in power generation. What did they fall? Was it 17%? And we're only warming up. And there's immediate tasks. Warming up the Irish people in delivering a solar revolution, delivering retrofitting, delivering public transport. You can laugh at that, but that actually improves and transforms the quality of people's lives, which is what our job is to deliver. We have got immediate project. Rather than having election, I believe we should spend our time delivering a future broadcasting funding mechanism so that one of the biggest challenges of our time, which is the misinformation and disinformation that is widespread across the land and across the world, we have to deliver that before the summer recess, as we have all agreed.
Censorship, in other words.
We have to deliver what Roderick Gorman has set in train.
Propaganda.
A way of actually managing the international protection and the people coming into our country in a way that works for all our people. And there's immediate work to be done on that. That cannot delay, wait for an election, and then whatever period of time that takes. I prefer for us to deliver that now. I prefer to deliver those government, as I intend, the coming weeks, on a strategy and an approach towards a just transition towards a sustainable future, which really picks up on that partnership model. And that legislation I would prefer to bring to the House rather than going to an immediate election. And we have work to do, each party here. Show me a party which is prepared for an election, which has a manifesto already written, which has the answer to the key questions of our time in terms of how do we go now to 90% emission reductions by 2040? How do we deliver the further advances in housing and health? We should spend time thinking about that. But first, we have two elections that we do need to give due attention and due respect, rather than calling for another immediate general election. We have a Europe. Well, that's a question, Michael. That would be up to the people.
Sorry, I'm an English teacher.
And the people have a choice there. The people in that European election, and this is a big, historical, important European election, where in one hand you have people putting themselves forward. Europe is full. Climate action can wait. I wouldn't touch those vaccines. We don't need to restore nature. Well, I don't agree with that vision of the future, and I think it's important that that decision of the Irish people and people across Europe is the focus of our attention in the next 10 weeks. Just as importantly, probably even more importantly, is us giving attention to the local elections. In our country, we all talk about Bunnock the Hare in our constitution system. The cornerstone of our democracy is in every constituency, every council, every the meetings of the councillors. Those incredible difficult decisions, we all know, anyone here has been a councillor, know it's one of the hardest places to be. Because sometimes you have to take a hard vote and the public gallery is behind you. And you have to raise your hand, something that you believe is right, but what not everyone wants to see. And I think our constitutional imperative should be on focusing on those local and European elections now. It'll be strange, out of respect for our constitution, I would refer to the Taoiseach and Taoiseach by those titles. I'm going to have to turn to Leo and the Taoiseach now. Simon beside, where's Simon gone? I think he's very well placed. Can I say, just as a background, as a teenager, he established that AAA autism group in Wicklow. Now, that, believe it or not, is not that unusual. Right across the country, There are civic actions like that where people are actually coordinating and organising to improve the quality of lives of their people. In autism alone, snowflakes up in swords. Snowflake because every individual is special, different, but occasionally can suffer a meltdown. Organises activities for children, families with autism. Open Spectrum in South Dublin does the exact same. Rainbow clubs in Cork. It's all over the country. We have this tradition of civic engagement. And part of that is recognising that the state does not do enough. And that's where the instinct comes from to go into politics, which all of us have in.
Okay. Hey, Graham, how's things? This is what I wanted to play because, no, not that one. These lads in Gripped.
Pearls before swine, Michael. Pearls before swine. But we thought to their advantage. But Michael, I think, yes. The coronation, you said it was just going to.
They did an interesting analysis of the incentives for Fianna Fáil, either collectively or in some backbench individuals to go against the Harris vote. Let's see. So we know now that Martin didn't go for it. Probably a good job for us. You know, it shows he's got no balls, but you know, shows he sees things as a uniparty. But maybe the backbench when it comes to the division battle, maybe some of the backbenchers will pull Harris down, which is not necessarily a good thing for us as nationalists because we're not ready. You know, we need more time. We're growing. We're starting from zero, and we're getting organised. It's all about candidates and thinking about who's going to run where, and not just leaving it to the pixies, because like the smaller parties, they just can't seem to get it together to run candidates and fill all the gaps basically where candidates are required. For example,
to happen, but
there are 900 over 900 council seats available in the local elections. If you total up all the local authorities, the county councils, there's about 26 of those, and municipal or boroughs, whatever they're called, city councils, there's about 5 or 6 of those. No, 4 in Dublin, and then Galway, Cork, Limerick, Limerick. I think that's it. Yeah, Galway, Cork, Limerick, and Dublin. What's that? 33 with about 30, between 30 and 50 or 60 seats in each one. Dublin City Council, I think, is about 60 seats, and some of the smaller ones, smaller counties, smaller cities have maybe 30 seats. But if you total them all up, there's 900 seats available. Now, based on the no vote, which if everybody who voted no happened to vote for a nationalist party or candidate or an independent, 2/3 of the people who voted no. So that would 2/3 of those 900 seats would therefore go to nationalist and independents, which is 600 seats. But we don't even have 100 or 150 candidates. So the limiting factor is not the vote. The vote is there. The limiting factor is the number of candidates. And that it's not as many candidates would be required for the Dáil election, true, but we do need to make sure that we've got all constituencies covered, at least one solid nationalist candidate in every Dáil constituency. We need to be thinking about that and doing the homework and finding out where we live. And if you're a commentator, you've got a voice, you need to be getting yourself up to date on this sort of stuff. Okay, here we go.
Is that so certain? It doesn't have to be that certain. Talk about how Fine Gael can play this to their advantage. But Michael, I think, yes, let us talk about how Fianna Fáil could play this to their advantage, while also listing to proviso that under Martin, they won't.
I would say under Martin, they won't. The question will be, to what extent Martin matters? To what extent Micheál might have come to the end of a certain kind of road? I think this is also happening, let's face it, Gary, in the consequence that we have become aware that some Fianna Fáilers, whatever their ultimate action might be, whether or not they decide to demonstrate a testicular fortitude, which had previously been absent, have been looking at the numbers and have worked out certain things. No, I would say the first thing we should point out is, and this is, I think, fairly widely accepted, that within the broad sweep of the parliamentary party, there is somewhere between a mixture of discomfort, embarrassment, and pure mule shame that, having previously brought down the government on the basis of a confidence motion resulting from the incompetence of the health minister, then known as Simon Harris, they're now going to go through the lobbies not that much time later and say, okay, we don't think that he was doing a great job as Minister for Health. In fact, he was doing such a bad job as Minister of Health, we're going to take the government down. Now we're going to vote for him to be Taoiseach, because we think he's come along, he's learned a lot of lessons, he's such have nobody else who wants or can be leaders.
Okay, so they've obviously moved on to the no votes because there's Mary Lou speaking. Well, yeah, the interesting thing is going to be what the Fianna Fáil backbenchers do. Probably won't show any balls, but if they do, it'll be funny and very important, because it's going to mean things are going to work into a period of acceleration, which is probably not what we need at this stage. But we need, if it happens, we need to start moving quick.
So he's going to be leader, and that's the real reason we have to vote for him.
And these lads will go through the ins and outs of it.
And we're going to vote for him on that basis. And that is generating a real sense of kind of discomfort, a lot of shifting in chairs, a lot of not maintaining eye contact when asked this kind of question. So that's the departure point. Then the numbers come in, Gary.
And the numbers are pretty brutal. That's the wonderful thing about numbers, Michael. They're the essence of politics. When Fine Gael came out saying some very unfriendly things about Georgia Maloney, we said they probably shouldn't say those, because looking ahead, Maloney's party, the ECR, is likely to be a very important part of the EPP's plans for the future of the European Parliament. And given the Fine Gael are in the EPP, saying nasty things about them now could mean in a year you're having to go, well,
yeah,
I said they were fascists then, but actually in review, they're quite lovely people, perfectly capable of governing with us.
And the funny thing, the very funny thing about that is that right now, from word circulating around that centrifuge of information that is Brussels, the Georgia Maloney's party turns out is actually far more important to the EPP potentially than Fine Gael is, because Fine Gael is not at the moment being seen in the highest of regard and the best of orders by a number of people in the EPP. They don't seem to think that they're very Christian Democrat at all, even though, of course, they are Christian Democrat, because somebody told us they were, and they're members of the EPP, so they must be. So it's a funny old way the way that history works.
A couple of Fianna Fáilers have talked about what I think is actually the best strategic play here, but they're only talking about it individually because at leadership level, it's just not going to happen. It's too, I was going to say avant-garde, but no, it's not avant-garde. It's just a bit too much will to do it than Martin has shown. And I suppose, Michael, before we get into what they're actually talking about, very, very quietly, and with absolutely no indication that they'll actually do it, because to not be unkind to Fianna Fáil, Michael, but if I had to describe it as one thing, I would say describe it as a party of people who've entirely lost their balls.
Well, I was going to say that my description of this move, rather than avant-garde, would have been ballsy. So therefore, I suppose, if we want to continue on with that particular metaphor or analogy, then yeah, that works.
So here's just some assumptions we're working on here when we talk about this. Simon Harris, if he gets into Taoiseach's office, is going to seek to increase his own prestige and the prestige of his party to drive up votes. I mean, that seems self-explanatory, but it's an important point. He is going to do that by refocusing and rehardening on areas like crime, immigration, small business, standard Fine Gael issues, but very importantly, also issues where voters have been drawn to Sinn Féin and the Independents, and a lot of those were Fianna Fáil voters, not originally Fine Gael voters. He will then do this while keeping an eye to create a situation where he can call an election at the time that best suits him. I saw the Irish Times, Michael, had an article, and it was something like Harris pledges that the government will run its full term. And then when you look at what it actually said, it's like, I would like to run the full term. That is my intention.
Okay, but even before we get there, just to clarify, because I think a lot of people don't understand quite how it is. There are 160 TDs in the Dáil. The government has 80. The opposition has 79. So it is actually, even though nothing has ever felt like a moment of crisis, the way that regularly in the last number of years Tory governments did, which had much bigger majorities because there was the fear of a backbench parade. But it's the numbers that create the opportunity, or indeed the problem, because as it stands, all but I think one of the independents, who constitutes a large part of the opposition, have said that they're going to vote against Harris, right? Now, obviously, all the other parties, like the People Before Profit, Sinn Féin, the Labour Party, Social Democrats, etc., won't vote for him. So, the numbers are there that mean it doesn't even have to be a party. It doesn't have to be the party. Just has to be a few brave, solitary souls ploughing their own furrow, Gary, following their own consciences. And poor old Simon gets the shaft. So, so what is the prospect? Why might some of these brave souls? You're saying Simon is following. Well, he doesn't actually have to do anything, does he? But it's very hard for him to do anything within this time frame.
Yeah, so Simon will get some level of bounce just from being a new person, cleans out the cabinet. Simon Coveney is gone. Simon Coveney has graciously left the stage before being pushed.
Okay.
Helen McEntee looks like she's out of justice, because if you're going to run and as you said, Michael, you're not going to have a lot of time. You're going to have to do things that make people feel you are taking something seriously.
Yes.
And Helen McEntee in justice is not that. That's just not it.
Just not.
So he will have something from that. There are a couple of large things they could do, which would have an impact, mostly on just giving a sense of what the government is and getting them into a position where they can go for election and drive themselves up from where they are now by going into that Sinn Féin independent pool, maybe drawing back some disaffected Fine Gaelers who are disappointed with Varadkar. The problem then is from the perspective of Fianna Fáil, what that creates for you. Micheál Martin is not an agent of growth. Micheál Martin is an agent of managed decline. So maybe you go up, most likely you don't. It's hard to see what new thing Micheál Martin is going to do that could lift you up other than the party coming up in the polls just because the government, as in Fine Gael, starts doing better.
Yeah.
So there's no real advantage to Fianna Fáil to have this run on other than just a vague hope that Fine Gael drags you up with them. So a Harris Taoiseach, I think, is very dangerous to Fianna Fáil. If he can properly embed, properly represent things, then he can draw, I think, a lot of people who would have been traditionally Fianna Fáil, which creates an interesting situation where probably the best move for Fianna Fáil as a party, as opposed to a vehicle for Micheál Martin, is to take out Harris at the vote, to refuse to allow him to become Taoiseach on the basis that he's incompetent, and that he's so incompetent he brought down the last government, and that you'll be damned if you're going to do it again.
Yeah, and I think again there's a point worth making, just a slightly technical point about the numbers. If we allow at the moment that Fine Gael are running, we'd call it 20%, right? Imagine the Fine Gael are running at 20% of the polls, and Fianna Fáil are running at 16%. Now, even in the face of those numbers, where Fine Gael are ahead, a little bit ahead of Fianna Fáil, right? There is within Fine Gael right now, and has been for a while, a kind of a sense of doom that outside of Dublin that they were just going to get murdified. We have said before that's a possibility, that's a real possibility. They have been tied to a lot of the green policies, which are outside of the cities, are seen as being anti-country, anti-agriculture. And therefore, potentially, even though Fianna Fáil might do slightly worse, because they have the incumbents and Fine Gael lack the incumbents, that'll lead to a depressing effect on the vote. That in the end, it could end up the Fine Gaelers being eliminated will end up voting Fianna Fáilers who might, in other circumstances, not be elected. If we get a Harris bounce, Gary, right? Say he comes out and he says all sorts of lovely things. For example, I am confidently expecting we will hear some very strong language about crime.
We've already started to hear some very strong language about crime. And it's strongly suspected that at the Ardèche that's happening this weekend, there's going to be further announcements on crime. They've clearly recognised it as an issue they're weak in.
We're hearing words about building a prison, Gary.
Things that sound like perhaps people shouldn't be getting bail. Like out there stuff.
It's old-fashioned Fine Gael law and order stuff, which I think there's a hunger for. I think we're going to start hearing all sorts of new language about borders and migration. We may even see the odd large plane being chartered and some young men from Georgia being advised the time has come back to go back to Georgia. So there are things he can do that will be performative, but will send a message, and a message I think that there's going to be a considerable appetite for. So, and on top of that, they'll get a buzz. The problem for Fianna Fáil is that if that gap between the two starts to really grow, then instead of being Fianna Fáil benefiting from a problem that Fine Gael is experiencing at the local level, say because of incumbency or whatever, if that gap starts to grow and the Fine Gaelers, because even if every election is local, if there's a strong wind blowing at a national level, it's very hard to resist it. So if Fine Gael starts to do better and start to widen that gap, that means that the Fine Gaelers are going to be the ones who are going to be ahead on the first preference, and it'll be the Fianna Fáilers who are going to be staring on the barrel of elimination to elect the Fine Gaelers. And there are a lot of guys out there whose seats are far from safe. I mean, they're okay, but they're not doing brilliant. And what they are going to be asked to do, it seems to me, Gary, is simply this. They're being told, okay, we're going to be the responsible people. We're going to make sure that this government continues all the way down to the end. But there's two things, Gary, what are there not? First of all the way down to the end is probably not much more than 7 months. And what guarantee do they have in Fianna Fáil that Harris doesn't throw in a month of pyrotechnics and then goes and runs for the country? Maybe. I mean, it seems bizarre to me. You I think it's more possible than I do. But goes for the country in June. What does that do for Fianna Fáil? Or more to the point, for the Fianna Fáil TD, who doesn't really give a damn about what Micheál Martin does or doesn't want, but he wants to keep his seat.
Here's what I would say on that, on whether or not I think it's more likely. Harris is very difficult to predict. I think his incentives have changed. Now he's Taoiseach. I don't think you can go on a lot of his past behaviour. I know certain parties are advising him that is what he should do. And to be honest, if I was advising him myself, that is probably what I would advise him to do. To go in, make some broad spectacles, to use the fact that so many of your TDs are not sitting to hide the fact that you are starting to very aggressively go through selection processes and pushing new candidates out all across the country. Yeah. To basically try and mitigate the fact that you're going to have a bad day because so many of your people aren't running again. Keep it going, say the right words, and then at the smallest amount of distance that you legally have to notify people, pull the election out from under them. Basically to bring them down and to ameliorate some of your issues. So that's 3 weeks. So the thing there is that if Harris listens to the people who are saying that, and he's capable of it, Fianna Fáil will not know a moment of peace until the actual election, because he can do it at any time. He can just go to the president and seek the dissolution of the government.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said he's and the core of that is he is unpredictable. I don't think that they really will have a strong sense of this man to any great degree more than the people outside. I think that he's going to be unpredictable, and that's going to be deeply uncomfortable for them.
No, I mean, then you also have, if we look at Sinn Féin, in the week since the referendum, Sinn Féin has come out and said it will not run the referendum again, despite the fact it said so. It has come out against the hate speech laws. is come out against the EU Migration Pact on the ground of national sovereignty. There was talk of repatriating failed asylum seekers. Now, they did that in a couple of weeks because they obviously looked at that and went, we were told that was going to be popular. The people who told us that was going to be popular, what else have they told us was going to be popular?
Sinn Féin have been learning all sorts of new words. I mean, it's impressive language apprehension.
But that's the other thing, and this affects both Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. Sinn Féin are well organised and they're willing to make these movements. If they think something is unpopular, they will go against it. So Sinn Féin are on a downswing now from the heights they had gotten. If you give Sinn Féin 7 months, do you really believe they're not going to try and improve that and that they don't have the capability to do that? So then if you're advising Harris, it's like, no, do it now. Do not give them time to get better. The problem there is that Fianna Fáil, if that is what Harris does, Fianna Fáil will then go into the election, having allowed Harris to strengthen themselves, to get people in to replace some of the people they're going to lose, having chosen the moment explicitly that he thinks is beneficial to him, which will not be the moment that's beneficial to Fianna Fáil, and where you have just voted him in as Taoiseach.
Yeah, you voted him in as Taoiseach, and the only excuse you have for doing that is your desire for stability and to make sure that this government goes to the full extent of its term. You do that, and then bang, 2 months later, he's called election. You look like a double Egypt. You're an Egypt for voting for the man that you said was incompetent to be a minister and therefore brought the government down. And you're an Egypt because you said the government was going to last the full of its term and go into March. And here you are in June of the previous year, and you're getting an election because you didn't realize this man was going to do it. It's not a good look. And we know that there are a number of TDs out there who are looking at this. Also, there are a number of TDs out there who are just, frankly, cranky and pissed off and fed up with Martin and fed up with managed decline and fed up with the idea that they have to be a fundamentally centre-left progressive party which disrespects and dislikes its own membership in a desperate attempt to get Social Democrats to vote for them, who will never vote for them, Gary. And they're thinking, you know what? let's just bring this debacle to an end. But the point you made, I absolutely agree, and this is the point I've been made for a long time. Sinn Féin, two things. First of all, you cannot assume that Sinn Féin are going to keep going down. I absolutely don't think that they will. They may trend down for another little while, but yes, you're right. They have shown a capacity to turn around, to recognise where politically they've got things wrong, where voters are not, and they are, and they're going to rectify that. So if that capacity means, to me, strongly indicates that they're going to stabilise, and maybe not just stabilise. Secondly, even those votes that they have lost, when a lot of the commentators are talking about that, Gary, as if those votes are gone away forever. They were up at 36, 37%, now they're down to 25%, right? So that's, say, a 12% loss. But those votes aren't lost. If the election happens and there is no other alternative, a lot of those former Sinn Féin voters will become Sinn Féin voters again, because that's who they'll go back to. They want to vote for someone, they'll go back to Sinn Féin, maybe grudgingly, but it doesn't matter if they end up voting for them. So if you can get Sinn Féin when they're still a little bit destabilised.
Just going to remanage a wee bit, because I have to check something on my schedule. I don't want to broadcast that to the whole world. So we'll just go back to the tab. You're going to be left holding the bag or the knife. That's the one, including the audio. Bang. Go.
Where they still have a bit of a problem, when there's still potential to dance with. That would seem to me to be the single strongest argument for going. Why give them time to reassess, to stabilise, and then to eventually, potentially start going forward again?
No, and what is interesting here is that Sinn Féin have changed. Fine Gael will now have changed. Harris is saying different things. The only people who haven't seemed to react to the referendum defeat at all, or had any period of reflection, are the Greens and Fianna Fáil. And frankly, it doesn't really matter to the Greens because their voters fell a particular way. But if you remember, Michael, what we saw from some of the polling there, Fianna Fáil voters did not align with the party at all.
Not at all. And I think it's curious to see that we've had comments from senior, old, shall we say, party members, TDs, saying, "Come on, lads, can we cop ourselves on?" But at the level of the front bench and the leadership, no, there has been. And you know what? I don't think at this stage they're capable of it.
Martin is a leader of stagnation and managed decline. So that's what you're going to get. And there's going to be a tone of this is simply the inevitable facts of reality. And so there can be no change. There can be no rejuvenation or renewal of it. But I think I can kind of tell what the pushback would be on this if you're in Fianna Fáil or in Martin's camp. There's no point having an early election or worrying about this, because the only conceivable government which can form is the coalition at current polling levels.
Yeah.
And the problem, I think, there is that sometimes numbers will surprise you and it turns out what you thought was viable is not, and vice versa. But even if it is a case where the coalition has to be removed or has to be restored, there can be very big differences in that. For instance, Michael, Fianna Fáil are now down at 16%. The independents are at 17%.
Yeah.
A situation in which Fine Gael is the largest party and begins negotiations and says, now, honestly, we'd love to go back in with you, and we will. But we do want to just make you aware that theoretically, now it'd be very messy, we don't want to do it, but theoretically there are enough independents that if we wanted to go just full mercenary on this, we could probably supplant you. That's a very different negotiation from you are our only possible partner. And people would say you'd never get that many independents together, it'd be incredibly messy.
Although there's a decent chance the next time that the very large majority of the independents will be probably organised into 2 voting blocks and will actually make it easier to negotiate.
Well, that's the thing. All you need to be able to do is during the negotiations apply pressure to Fianna Fáil that, well, listen, we could go with other people. And suddenly you aren't quite getting the things you thought you would get. And yes, you're in coalition, but you're kind of the minor party, very much so.
But that's the point, Gary. So what if there's going to be the same coalition? For Fianna Fáil, the question is not who are they going to be in coalition. The Fianna Fáil is the question of how many seats are they going to get? Do they get more seats by going now, or do they get more seats by waiting? I don't see how looking like potentially putting themselves at risk of looking like double gobshites is going to be a benefit for them when it comes to adding up the Dáil seats. And at an individual level, Gary, does it matter to you if you're a guy with a little bit of a majority, but a reasonable vote, but a swing hard one way or the other would see you unseated? What do you care about the next coalition? You've lost your job. You're not in the coalition. You want the thing that you think is going to be best for the National Fianna Fáil vote, for your vote, and after that, the coalition can organise itself.
So here's the thing, though. Martin will never get behind a vote not to elect Harris.
No.
But here is where it becomes a problem. A lot of the independents have said they will not vote for Harris as Taoiseach. Now, the last government, the Taoiseach was appointed by 87 votes. That involved a number of independents. So far, I've only heard of 2 independents, Mark McSherry and Joe McHugh, who have said that they are likely to support Harris. If they cannot build more independents, you create this problem for the Fianna Fáilers. All you would need is 1 or 2 Fianna Fáilers to vote against Harris for that vote to fail, which means that the vote of every Fianna Fáil TD who voted for Harris is important.
Yes.
Which means on the doorsteps, should that happen and you go into an election, some people, let's say Michael, someone like Sinn Féin, might go to your constituency and say, well, if he hadn't voted for Harris, Harris wouldn't have got in.
Exactly.
Okay, got my wee job done. Let's continue.
It's entirely possible that this vote passes 81 or 82, So you move a couple of Fianna Fáilers that, Harris just doesn't get in. Now, there are rumours, there are mentions, very faint, very vague, very unreliable, that a couple of Fianna Fáilers may do this regardless of what Martin decides. Now, that is a really bad scenario for Fianna Fáil, because if the party goes one way and takes the hit for doing it, but Martin can't control his people and the vote fails anyway, well, then every Fianna Fáiler who voted for it is going to look like a fucking gobshite.
Yup.
So
Double gobshite.
The question: would you rather be left holding the bag or holding the knife? And in pretty much all of those circumstances, I'll take the knife.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say the baby.
So here's the thing: we've seen Fianna Fáil TDs work themselves up. This constant kind of, we'll do this, we'll take out Martin, we'll do whatever, and they never do it. So at this point, frankly, Michael, I think they'll fall in line, and I think they'll just do the vote. The problem is that 95% of them can fall in line. One or two of them can decide to go against it, and inadvertently they topple the government. That a couple of Fianna Fáilers may do this regardless of what Martin decides. Now, that is a really bad scenario for Fianna Fáil.
Let's take it back a few seconds.
That a couple of Fianna mentions, very faint, very vague, their constituents in say, well, if he hadn't voted for Harris, Harris wouldn't have got in.
Exactly.
It's entirely possible that this vote passes 81 or 82. So you move a couple of Fianna Fáilers that, Harris just doesn't get in. Now, there are rumours, there are mentions, very faint, very vague, very unreliable, that a couple of Fianna Fáilers may do this regardless of what Martin decides. Now, that is a really bad scenario for Fianna Fáil, because if the party goes one way and takes the hit for doing it, but Martin can't control his people and the vote fails anyway, well, then every Fianna Fáiler who voted for it is going to look like a fucking gobshite.
Yup.
So
Double gobshite.
The question: would you rather be left holding the bag or holding the knife? And in pretty much all of those circumstances, I'll take the knife.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say the baby.
So here's the thing: we've seen Fianna Fáil TDs work themselves up. This constant kind of, we'll do this, we'll take out Martin, we'll do whatever, and they never do it. So at this point, frankly, Michael, I think they'll fall in line, and I think they'll just do the vote. The problem is that 95% of them can fall in line. One or two of them can decide to go against it, and inadvertently they topple the government.
You see, that to me, and we'll finish. That to me is the lovely conundrum here. First of all, I think, yeah, you're right. I think the vast majority of them have absolutely no desire to do anything except what they're told to do. But the problem is, if there happened to be three, it's potentially, that might be enough. Three cranky, fuck it, I'm sick of it and I don't care. That we've mentioned before, that scene from, what the hell is it? News? It's a network where the character leans out the window and shouts out, I'm mad as hell and I'm not taking it anymore. If you have three, four independent-minded, Fianna Fáil-minded TDs who lean out the window, I'm mad as hell and I'm not taking it anymore, they will be for, and all the rest, they will bring the government down. There will be an election. All the rest of them will then be the double gobshites who voted for Harris and still ended up having to go to the country. And this time, essentially, on a defend the government ticket, which is going to be a defend Harris ticket, the man they voted against, a confidence vote against it because of his incompetence. But the other three, Gary, the other 3 or 4 will be heroes of the party, and I would predict will be elected with a substantially increased majority. The numbers, because they're so tight. So then you have to decide, what is the greater risk? What is the greater risk to me, and what is the greater risk to the party?
I have already heard from multiple people that they have been canvassed by Fianna Fáil election candidates, local election candidates, some of whom are sitting councillors.
Yeah.
And any time that they have pushed back and just said, I'm not going to vote for Fianna Fáil, I'm not going to vote for the government, I'm not going to vote for Martin, every one of those people has just immediately distanced themselves from headquarters. It's always been headquarters. It's just, that's it. That's headquarters. We're not into that sort of thing down here.
But the problem is that you can only do that so long and so often. And they're coming to the end of that road. If they haven't, in fact, come to the end of that road.
So you have people on 16%. You fall below 15%, weird stuff's going to start happening. People who have had very, very safe seats are now no longer going to have those seats. And that's already going to happen to an extent if things go badly. And someone just realizes, you look at the Sinn Féin vote, you look at the independent vote, and you kind of go, if I vote against Harris, even if he gets through, I'm in a much better position than I was the other day. And if I lose the whip, if whatever happens, fuck it. Because I will keep my seat, and I wouldn't have kept my seat without it. And also, the local Fianna Fáil party, Michael, might surprise you, a lot of the Cummins, not terribly fond of the idea of voting in Harris.
Just to contextualise, Gary, before we close, just here's a number and a reminder for those lads out there. Now, it was an unusual situation with transfers, admittedly, but in 2011, you were saying 15%. Fianna Fáil got 17.4% of the vote, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is 1.4% more than they're getting in the polling now. They got 20 seats. 20 seats, Gary. That's a lot of people unemployed.
That is a lot of people unemployed. But the problem, Michael, is that that's a lot of people who don't need to be unemployed.
Don't need.
Who could perhaps make some sort of dramatic movement and take it back.
Guarantee their employment. Guarantee possibly as well the future of their party. But
one of the interesting things that I found about this, I've heard mention of it, like quiet kind of, maybe this person will do this. Maybe this person will do about this in the party. Is anyone talking about it? What I've got is, no, I'm not hearing a lot about it, which is weird because gossip spreads through political parties like wildfire.
Yes.
But if you were going to do this, you wouldn't want it to come out before the vote.
You want it to be an ambush.
There is that sort of, it's quiet, maybe too quiet.
Yeah, it's very quiet out there tonight.
I mean, you would expect, and this is such an obvious thing, that you would expect discussion of it, even if it just died immediately. But instead, you've just got nothing. And you're like, that's interesting. There are some people who should be talking who are absolutely not saying anything.
This is, Sherlock Holmes and the dog that didn't bark at night.
So I think that's the real problem here. The real problem is that enough of Fianna Fáil breaks away that they get the benefit rather than the party gets the benefit. That, I think, is the problem that they should be considering now. But then again, I think, and this is only my personal view, but Michael, I think there's a real question about the leadership of Fianna Fáil and whether or not Fianna Fáil is being led for the benefit of Fianna Fáil or for the benefit of the people in those positions. Like, is it for the party or is it for headquarters? And I would say a lot of the decisions have been for headquarters.
If by headquarters, I think headquarters is a proxy word for a party, that, Gary, which increasingly feels like a one-man band. However, we should see if events eventuate over the week. We may come back with some more exciting and concrete news on Sunday. But for the time being, we've put that out into the universe and we should see what comes back.
Oh, that vote, I think, the vote is Monday, is it? It's the 9th, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, that could be Tuesday. But it's early next week anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll find out then. Going on past behaviour, Michael, they'll do nothing. They'll take it. And then they'll complain of their slow, inevitable dwindling rather than actually attempt to do anything.
Death by desanguation.
Death by apathy.
Death by apathy, yeah. Death by desire not to do anything at all. We shall be back on Sunday, and who knows, there may have been exciting turns. But until then, goodbye.
All the best. Good afternoon. This is TRSI. I am Gary Kavanagh, and I'm here today with my friend and colleague, Michael Dwyer. I know we said there would be no show this week as we will be away, which didn't stop some of you complaining to me that there hadn't been a show. I would like to point out that if you hadn't heard us say in the last show that there would not be a show, seems an odd thing to be complaining of.
Because that meant they weren't listening, Gary, and therefore they have no standing, as in court, to make complaints like that.
Pearls before swine, Michael. Pearls before swine. But we thought, actually there was a point that a couple of people raised about the last episode, which made sense and which was sort of time sensitive. So we thought we would come back and do kind of a short show on it, and you will get your normal show on Sunday. Don't worry, this isn't a replacement. This is an addition.
This is a treat.
Yes, and a moose-bouche. So in the last show, we had been talking about Simon Harris, what he's likely to do when he comes in, how difficult he'll be to predict, and some of the different views that are being put forward as to when he should hold the election, because it will ultimately be his choice. Well, once he's voted in as Taoiseach, it's his choice. And a couple of people asked, well, you described it as a coronation. You said it was just going to happen, but is that so certain? It doesn't have to be that certain. Talk about how Fine Gael can play this to their advantage. But Michael, I think, yes, let us talk about how Fianna Fáil could play this to their advantage, while also listening to proviso that under Martin, they won't.
I would say under Martin, they won't. The question will be, to what extent Martin matters? To what extent Micheál might have come to the end of a certain kind of road? I think this is also happening, let's face it, Gary, in the consequence that we have become aware that some Fianna Fáilers, whatever their ultimate action might be, whether or not they decide to demonstrate a testicular fortitude, which had previously been absent, have been looking at the numbers and have worked out certain things. Now, I would say the first thing we should point out is, and this is, I think, fairly widely accepted, that within the broad sweep of the parliamentary party, there is somewhere between a mixture of discomfort, embarrassment, and pure mule shame that, having previously brought down the government on the basis of a confidence motion resulting from the incompetence of the health minister, then known as Simon Harris, they're now going to go through the lobbies not that much time later and say, okay, we don't think that he was doing a great job as Minister for Health. In fact, he was doing such a bad job as Minister for Health, we're going to take the government down. Now we're going to vote for him to be Taoiseach, because we think he's come along, he's learned a lot of lessons, he's such a good guy. Fine Gael have nobody else who wants or can be leader, so he's going to be leader, and that's the real reason we have to vote for him. And we're going to vote for him on that basis, and that is generating a real sense of kind of discomfort, a lot of shifting in chairs, a lot of not maintaining eye contact when asked this kind of question. So that's the departure point. Then the numbers come in, Gary.
And the numbers are pretty brutal. That's the wonderful thing about numbers, Michael. They're the essence of politics. When Fine Gael came out saying some very unfriendly things about Georgia Maloney, we said they probably shouldn't say those, because looking ahead, Maloney's party, the ECR, is likely to be a very important part of the EPP's plans for the future of the European Parliament. And given the Fine Gael are in the EPP, saying nasty things about them now could mean in a year you're having to go, well,
yeah,
I said they were fascists then, but actually in review, they're quite lovely people, perfectly capable of governing with us.
And the funny thing, the very funny thing about that is that right now, from word circulating around that centrifuge of information that is Brussels, the Georgia Maloney's party turns out is actually far more important to the EPP potentially than Fine Gael is, because Fine Gael is not at the moment being seen in the highest of regard and the best of orders by a number of people in the EPP. They don't seem to think that they're very Christian Democrat at all, even though, of course, they are Christian Democrat because somebody told us they were, and they're members of the EPP, so they must be. So it's a funny old way the way that history works.
A couple of Fianna Fáilers have talked about what I think is actually the best strategic play here, but they're only talking about it individually because at leadership level, it's just not going to happen. It's too, I was going to say avant-garde, but no, it's not avant-garde. It's just a bit too much will to do it than Martin has shown. And I suppose, Michael, before we get into what they're actually talking about, very, very quietly, and with absolutely no indication that they'll actually do it, because to not be unkind to Fianna Fáil, Michael, but if I had to describe it as one thing, I would say describe it as a party of people who've entirely lost their balls.
Well, I was going to say that my description of this move, rather than avant-garde, would have been ballsy. So therefore, I suppose, if we want to continue on with that particular metaphor or analogy, then yeah, that works.
So here's just some assumptions we're working on here when we talk about this. Simon Harris, if he gets Taoiseach's office, is going to seek to
howling at the moon and achieving nothing. Adversarial debate is healthy, but I don't believe in slamming doors on the possibility of progress and the public good for the sake of maintaining a facade. Slamming a door leaves both sides isolated. I believe that there is more to be gained for my constituents by working with government ministers of whatever persuasion and their departments to achieve social justice and reward for work and enterprise.
That's all that matters, right?
That has been my consistent approach. I am here to work for the small business owners who are struggling with spiralling costs. These are the risk takers, the entrepreneurs who contribute so much to wealth creation, to funding our social welfare system, to giving local employment. They need immediate, tangible support. I'm here to work for farmers who are literally bogged down not only by the weather, but by debt, bureaucracy, and the challenge of change. These are the people who put food on our tables, support our economy, underpin our way of life. They don't need lip service. They need real solutions to their problems and urgent practical assistance. Lack of housing is the scourge of our time. And irrespective of who is in government, it will take several more years to catch up on the supply due to the failures of the past. And we cannot build houses for our people without a skilled workforce. The apprenticeship scheme implemented by Minister Harris is a real positive. The ETB Training Centre in Thurles is a model of excellence that should be expanded and replicated right across the country. The chaos in our national broadcaster must be brought under control. A new funding system is urgently required and should incorporate those in the sector who are presently excluded. Local broadcasters are the first source of information and discourse for rural Ireland. They should have a trusted place in national debate. They must be acknowledged, respected, and financially supported. As Taoiseach-elect, you have a short time to put your stamp on government. It is a daunting task. I wish you well and hope you can fulfil your ambition.
Margaret the Concordia. Simon Harris will break a few records today. A man who took his seat at the 15th count, a member of a political party that came third in the last general election, will become Taoiseach today. And the Taoiseach carousel continues in this political bubble, where we have the people of this republic continuously locked out of the decision-making process. And there's no doubt that Simon Harris is very good at spin. I've never seen anybody be able to distance themselves from themselves so well as he has done in the last number of weeks. He's flipped from a committed proponent of the current hate speech law to a critique of elements of it. He was a pro-life campaigner to the person who introduced that heartbreaking law, and he has also been the person who has become elevated now to the position of Taoiseach, posing as a new broom. But the truth of the matter is, despite the fact that he is throwing promises around like confetti, he is the Varadkar continuity candidate. He has been a minister for 8 years. He owns the highest homelessness numbers in the history of the state. He owns the highest house prices in the history of the state. He owns the highest rents in the history of this state. And I think he also personifies the South Dublin political bubble that can't see beyond the M50, where establishment TDs talk to themselves and the NGOs and ignore the people. I don't believe he is a man of convictions. I believe his motto is, "There go my people. I must find out which way they're going, and then I will lead them." Simon Harris has a record which I believe has cost this country dearly. He threatened striking nurses with financial penalties. He announced free smear tests for women to save himself, placing so much pressure on the system and leading to dangerous delays for women. In the early days of COVID, he refused to meet with the nursing home sector, which was the most vulnerable element of that crisis. Indeed, at that time, thousands of people were moved from hospitals into nursing homes. Many of them weren't tested, which seeded COVID right through the nursing home system and led to many deaths. During COVID, he cancelled cancer screening and reduced cancer services, leading to 100,000 fewer women screened for breast cancer and a tidal wave of more advanced cancers. And the billions of overspend in the National Children's Hospital was, and I quote Simon Harris, not a scandal. In 2017, he promised that no child would go beyond 4 months for an operation. A PQ from AIM2 has shown that 55 children just in Temple Street and Crumlin alone are today waiting for more than a year for scoliosis surgery. And Simon Harris was the Minister for Justice for the first half of last year. And during that time, violent crimes increased, the number of Gardaí increased, the number of Gardaí resigning and retiring increased, and the number of Gardaí being attacked increased as well. I do think this is a historic day. I think we're seeing the elevation of a caretaker Taoiseach, a Taoiseach who will have the record of having the shortest term in the history of the state.
Thank you, Deputy Shanahan.
Firstly, I want to wish fair winds to Deputy Varadkar. While you got some big calls right, the macroeconomy, the pandemic and Brexit, this has not been a government for all people, nor for all parts of Ireland. People have become divided during this government. It has pitched urban against rural, motorist against cyclist, agriculture against the environmentalist, house buyers against immigrants. The social contract for young people is burst. Expectations for housing, good work, services have all been knocked back. The Dublin Cork Cabinet have starved large swathes of Ireland of investment, of development, of economic hope for a better life. The borders, Northwest, Midlands and my own region, the South East, have roared at Cabinet members to advance meaningful projects outside of their own patches. The administrative burden on our families, our farmers, our small business and home builders is absolutely out of control. As politics fails these people, their anger rises. It is a political mistake not to listen. Beyond reducing bureaucracy and supporting agriculture and enterprise, in my region we have 3 tests for the new Taoiseach: 24/7, our airport and the SETU PPP and allied promised capital development. People are wondering in the South East, how will our new Taoiseach change things for us? As Minister for Health, we saw you spending on the Dublin Children's Hospital while failing to support capital spending at University Hospital Waterford. You are closely associated with the Department of Health's blocking of 24/7 cardiac care at UHW with the shoddy Herity report. You know, we have still not seen the National Cardiac Review that you commissioned as Health Minister in 2017. As Minister for Higher Education, you are closely associated with preventing a full university in Waterford, forcing an underfunded merger between WIT and IT Carlow, and allowing unfettered spending and borrowing in the national university sector. Meanwhile, SETU Waterford has not seen a single new teaching building in over 20 years. You promised new disciplines, buildings, lecturers' contracts, a borrowing framework and student accommodation, none of which have happened yet. The regional southeast brain drain has worsened. You are known for your abilities, Minister, to communicate, but talk without action remains just talk. Our late engagement over this vote has signalled to me that my priorities, actually my region's priorities, those being 24/7, the airport, the Equitable University Funding Programme, supports for agriculture and business sectors, although in your programme for government, are not fully on your radar. For that reason, alas, I cannot vote for you as Taoiseach today. And yet, I hope you are a successful Taoiseach, a Simon 2.0 that actually fixes things, delivers a form of leadership that renews hope in politics, delivers better, simpler services to all people in parts of this republic. But most of all, I hope your tenure signals that at last the winds of positive change for Waterford and the South East are coming. Such change is the acid test for me and my constituents that finally Cabinet is willing to listen and deliver for Waterford and the South East region.
Thank you, Deputy Shanahan. Now the Rural Independent Group, where Deputy Matthew McGrath is sharing with colleagues. Deputy
Conor, I do wish to propose an alternative in this chamber here today in the name of Deputy Michael Healy-Rae, who has represented Kerry here in this chamber for many, many years, and Kerry County Council for many years before that. I believe he is well capable of carrying out the task, because he has the understanding of the people, and like myself, he knows what the people need and what they're concerned about. I believe we're the only alternative group here in the Dáil. On many occasions we have proven that, and I say, like, I agree with Deputy Burke, who said democracy shouldn't be taken for granted, and I agree with that. First of all, I want to wish Deputy Radker well and good health long into the future. Conor, I have to say that in the recent referendum and canvassing generally for our three local election candidates in Kerry, I never see people more angry or disillusioned. Farmers they see themselves being vilified and targeted here every day. Even last year, Minister Ryan ensured that the loose was painted white, 9 carriages, and advising people not to drink milk. I ask each and every one of you here today, what would we be like if our mothers didn't give us milk when we were growing up and after being born? Ridiculous stuff. And like the suggestion that one car would do 30 people in the community, and that we should bring wolves into the countryside. That's what Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael have supported, that kind of carry on for the last 4 to 5 years. Businesses are closing. In Killarney, another restaurant has closed today. And because of the VAT and the increase in the VAT and energy and rates cost. Housing, we know it failed completely. The immigration debacle, where over 2 billion has been spent, and even spent 860,000 euros to bring dogs and cats into the country for these immigrants. Squandering money, and yet people are out in the morning paying 40%, those working paying 40% tax and 4.5% USC charges down that. Health, we can't even get doctors. You can get a vet quicker into any farm than to get a doctor in the evening or weekends. It's a sad state that sick people can't just get a doctor. We see in the recent referendum where there was a consensus between all the parties, including Sinn Féin, who seem to be overlapping and lining up to go with Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil.
Are you going to give way to your...
Sinn Féin have been saying that Deputy Harris isn't fit to be Taoiseach. Why didn't they oppose him? Why did they see a chance here today to oppose him? And I'm giving the independent deputies here in this chamber today, if there's any scintilla of independence in it, now's the time to come out and vote for an independent candidate for Taoiseach here today. This is your chance. But the most of you that say your independence, you're Fine Gael attacked, and there's no difference at all now for the people outside to look in here. Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael are the same. Sinn Féin are lining up to go with either of them. And the Greens will be written off with the help of God.
Matty McGrath, please.
I rise today as well to second the nomination of Council of Deputy Michael Healy-Rae, because I believe he's a man who listens to the people. In politics since he was 10 years of age, canvassed in by-elections, and he stuck to Sladina. Listen to the people, which you've lost, completely lost. And we need to have a contest in this house. We can't just move around and have no election. And that's why we're doing this today. I want to say also to wish Leo Deputy Bradker the best in his retirement. And as well, if Minister Harris, which he will be elected, to wish him well and his family and his wife and children as well. While we extend, as I said, the sudden departure of outgoing Taoiseach Deputy Bradker, the government's final year creates serious instability and surrenders to the public service. It's akin to the captain of a ship being forced off when there's a shipwreck, which he's meant to say to last. Let's be clear, Minister Harris and his few new Fine Gael ministers bring no novelty and no change to the current Fine Gael government's legacy. The legacy will be mentioned for their deceit incompetence and decision to stop listening to the people. It has burdened the public with higher taxes and disregarded the devices of the ordinary people, both urban and rural. From the outset, the three-party coalition lacked a plan, a vision, and any bit of empathy with the people that elected them. The people voted in 2020 for change. They got no change. A cobbled together government by Deputy Martin and Deputy Radcliffe. Deputy Martin was the architect because he didn't want to be the first Fianna Fáil Taoiseach, leader, never to be Taoiseach. And I say to you, Minister Harris, how can we have trust? I hold a letter here that you wrote to the pro-life campaign in 2011 in Wicklow. Dear pro-life campaign, I'm contesting the next election. I'm happy so proud to support you and act the pro-life. In response to your questions, yes, if elected at all, I will oppose any legislation to introduce abortion in Ireland. And yes, I will support legislation that protects the human embryo and protects babies at all costs. And the legislation you brought in, how can we trust in you? The legislation was the most vicious and rigorous and disgusting that ever happened. Your legacy in health, the Children's Hospital, you made the whole lot of it. The scoliosis promise, the most fortunate people that were here a few weeks ago, that are waiting, you said 4 months, they're waiting years, languishing. Also, your attack, Fine Gael's attack on local government. You demolished local democracy. You set up Irish water, an unmitigated disaster. Many, many other. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Conglomerates is the name of the game. Both for Fianna Fáil, in the beef barons, in CU Hay, Smith Roadstone. All those people, all the big monopolies then are squeezing the lifeblood out of our communities. Not about the people of Ireland that get their lives for here. So I say to you, it's a sad legacy. Moving the deck chairs on this ship tonight is not going to do anything else for anybody. So I say to you, call an election and go to the people and get a fresh mandate and do something for the people.
Thank you, Conor. I start by wishing a former Taoiseach Leo Varadkar and former Minister Simon Coveney the very best in their future. This will be the third Taoiseach since government was formed in 2020. And this in itself shows how dysfunctional this government has been in the last 4 years. This government lacks understanding, lacks the ability or hunger to look after the ordinary people. This government to date has lacked common sense, and the people of this country are sick to their teeth of this government. The simple way to see how disconnected this government was with most of the opposition in the recent referendum, where people spoke emphatically, with an overwhelming majority of people rejecting Fine Gael. Which has ran out of all control, and a government running along happy with this crisis of 14,000 homeless, many of them children. Your inaction for housing in our cities, not allowing much needed development to build up where infrastructures already are in place, sees homelessness numbers crisis getting worse by day. In our countryside, between county development plans drawn up with a negative view to rural planning and another stumbling block of a planning regulator put in place by government, has seen young people coming to me weekly in high numbers being refused planning and being refused a chance to get their lives together off the ground. These are people who have a sight from the parents, who have a mortgage sorted, and won't be any burden in the state, but are refused for one reason or another, adding to the homeless list and our housing crisis. Our health crisis in this country is nothing short of appalling, and was the cause of the last government collapsing while you were Minister for Health, Minister Harris. We have close to 1 million people on waiting lists in this island, people in dreadful pain, seeking hip or knee surgeries or cataract surgeries to save their sight. And the list goes on and on. Thousands on hospital trolleys for days in some cases, seeking a bed, but left there in pain. These are the people who got up early in the morning in this country and worked hard and are left there in their time of need. Look at agriculture in this country, where farmers continuously tell me they are being treated as environmental terrorists, even that we have one of the best agricultural ran farms in this country. Are you as Taoiseach going to allow the Green Party continue to do absolute wreck to agriculture? That's a question you have to answer here today. Are you going to be a change and stand up for the people of this country? What Fine Gael did one time, they did one time stand up for the farmers of this country, but you've turned your back on them in recent years. And I'm asking you that here today. And there's a crisis on the ground as we speak. and we're getting no assistance. No farmers getting any assistance from government. Farmers are suffering severe mental health with the weather the way it is at the moment. I'd hope you'd announce a package this evening. Also the same with fisheries. You stood idly by year in, year out, as the only deal you got for fishermen in all that many years is a decommissioning deal to get rid of Irish trawlers out of Irish waters. It's a scandalous situation. Small businesses, 13 to 9%. You raised the VAT from 9 to 13.5%. You're putting small business, cafe owners, restaurants, pubs out of business, and you don't care. I don't understand what kind of a government you are. And many more. Student accommodation, hate speech, all these migration, all these issues need to be discussed in proper Taoiseach before anybody would support, and anybody that supports you here today, in my view, that and will lead to further closures of pubs, of cafes, are equally responsible.
Thank you, Deputy. Please.
For those closures in their own constituencies. Thank you.
Go to the Rural Independent Group.
Thanks,
the Independent Group.
Thanks,
Deputy
Colin.
Collins is sharing with Deputies Connolly, McNamara, Arkin and Fitzmaurice.
Thank you. There's been a lot of fanfare that this is a new start for Fine Gael and this government and the country. In reality, what we see is the same old, stale, out-of-touch political system that has been in power since the foundation of the state. You can play political musical chairs, give everything a fresh look, but this is just two sides of the same coin. Another Taoiseach from Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, the parties that have led this country into crisis after crisis, a broken housing system with record homelessness, record house prices, record rent, continuation with no-fault evictions and no end in sight, underfunded, understaffed health and public services, high levels of low pay and growing numbers of people in deprivation, at risk of poverty and inconsistent poverty. This is why, while the rich get richer, the top 1% have accumulated 70 times more wealth than the bottom half of this country since 2012, leaving the two richest people in Ireland owning 5 billion more wealth than the bottom 50% combined. This is a fundamental issue. What 9 decades of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil rule has left us with is a country for the rich. Taxes on Irish workers are 15% above the EU average, where we have one of the lowest corporation taxes in the world. Our employers' PRSI contribution is 66% below the EU average, and our taxes on wealth are less than half of most EU countries. 9 decades of Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil have created a country where working class people pay high taxes for failing public services, while the rich pay low taxes and can afford the best private services. From talking to people in my constituency, I don't think anyone buys for 1 second that this is a new beginning. This is the same old out-of-touch government with the same old out-of-touch parties that created a country that is getting harder and harder to make a decent life. You created the housing crisis, the crisis in our public services, and have stood over a massive transfer of wealth to the rich while deprivation and consistent poverty grows. We can no longer afford a political system that allows this to continue while everyone else struggles to find homes, services and decent wages. We can no longer afford to have Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael in power. Today is about the politics, not about the personalities. This is why people want a general election. Many people want a general election now. It is why I'm not voting for the proposed Taoiseach or from the proposed nomination from the Rural Independents.
Deputy Councillor Connolly.
Boatum Cogorges, her anul don Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, Vitu Guntale, the Fragri Igoni, Agus Hani Shenlum, Inanon nar Hani na Fragri Lum. Agus Boatum Kid Mila Falcha, Corref Clan, Simon Harris Sancho, and Van Kele Quiva, na Tishmahori Bart, Agus Mary, Agus na Gasur Killian, Agus Sirsha, Gondout, is privileged Mahasama, Agus Lost Starul and you, Agus. Furier ni vaime nan mahakiok the hort ditcha, bunia the policy, near level parsanta. Today is a very important day without a doubt for the Fine Gael party and for your family, and it's an absolute privilege, and I welcome your family here. You will not be having my support based on the policies that your party and your colleagues have continued with for years, where you talk about collateral damage. And this was encapsulated lately for me by Professor John Fitzgerald when he dealt with the Germany, saying we had a very housing crisis. And Professor John Fitzgerald said they were simply jealous and our problems arose from a successful economy. And I think that's what you accept. The problems are collateral to a successful economy. And I fundamentally disagree with that. Today, as I speak, there are 13,841 children, people and children homeless directly as a result of your policy. Yesterday in Galway, 71 people were on trolleys. Less than a year ago, the HIQA visited Galway and said when there were 25 on trolleys, it was grossly overcrowded. None of these policies happened by accident. They are the direct result of year government, continuous governments relying on the market, commodifying everything, and having no sense whatsoever as to what a republic truly means, and what public services truly mean, and what equality truly means. You're all waiting for the boats to rise with the tide. Nothing has changed as a result of COVID. Nothing has changed as a result of climate change, where we urgently require transformative change. They're not empty words. And when the former Taoiseach stands up, and the Taoiseach stands up today and talks about these problems being caused by outside events, you're totally wrong, and refusing to accept or look in the mirror and realise they're directly arising from your policies.
Thank you, Conor Rafferty. I'd like to begin by paying tribute to Deputies Coveney and Varadkar on their contribution to Irish life at some difficult junctures. Moving on to Deputy Harris, it's a motion of confidence in you as Taoiseach. Over the weekend, you promised that you would have the back of farmers, but you have served in a government which has been on the back of farmers. Like many small business owners, the only thing they get from government is a letter warning of new regulations threatening new fines. The cost of government in this state has ballooned since you entered Cabinet in 2016. It was 68 billion then, it's 110 billion now. Can anybody in this state say that the services on which they rely have increased by that proportion, that they're getting much better services now than they did then? Can anybody say that the infrastructure on which they rely to get to work, to live, is improving by that magnitude? So where is the money going? It is simply unclear, because anybody who rings any government department now will be put on hold and will be almost certainly not get through to anybody. They simply won't get an answer. The civil service do a wonderful job sometimes, but they require leadership, and they have become complacent and moribund under the lifetime of this government. Thank you. For that reason, I'm afraid I can't vote confidence in you.
Minister, I cannot vote for you as Taoiseach, because after 4 years of this government and 13 years of Fine Gael in government, you have not delivered for the North West. Earlier, Taoiseach Varadkar, who I wish well in his retirement from office, spoke of global megatrends influencing outcomes. Well, in my view, the only way to counter those trends in the context of balanced regional development is to have systemic and substantial policy-driven change across all government departments. You have not done that, and so regions like the North West lag behind. You've not addressed or delivered housing for the North West. CSO housing commencement figures show that in 2023, the 4 counties I represent, Sligo, Leitrim, North Roscommon and South Donegal, were in the bottom 10 counties when it came to housing commencements on a per capita basis. You've not delivered on health, where Trolley Watch figures show that from 2011, when Fine Gael entered government, the numbers on trolleys at Sligo University Hospital have increased by over 250%, while the national increase is 50%. The figures speak for themselves. You've not delivered on agriculture, where you were cheerleaders for the nature restoration law, without mitigating outcomes for the drained peatlands in the North West and no ring-fenced funding. Finally, Minister, I fully recognise that today is a momentous day for you and your family. And while I won't be voting for you as Taoiseach, on a personal level, I wish you and your family all that's good.
On a personal level, first of all, the outgoing Taoiseach, Leo Varadkar, and Minister Coveney, on your future, I want to wish you the best of luck. This isn't personal towards the new Taoiseach, but I cannot support a government that you have a minister there that has gone out to Brussels And the Irish farmers under the nature restoration law are relying on Italy, they're relying on the Dutch, they're relying on several other countries, and you won't listen to the Irish farmers here. And this government is supporting that. Minister, or future Taoiseach, you also stated in Galway at the weekend, I saw on the headlines, that you have the back of rural Ireland. When you drove from Galway in your state car back to Dublin, when people in Roscommon, in Lough Fuinchina, 92-year-old, 87-year-old, had their houses been flooded, are looking at water higher than their kitchens, and ye have not signed an emergency order to help those people. This is a problem not only in Roscommon, but it will be everywhere around the country. And you spoke in Galway about having the backs of farmers. It's a knife in the back that is being given to the farming community right around this country. And I cannot and will not support a government that is decimating parts of rural Ireland. The best thing, or the thing that you have done most in rural Ireland, is cause protest with basically not talking, not listening, not giving the services to the people that require it in rural Ireland. On a personal basis, I wish you luck, but I cannot support this government with what's going on, especially with the Green Party.
Now, Deputy Violet Ann Wynne, please.
And Corla, I wish the incoming Taoiseach the very best. The public want delivery, not an intent to deliver, not promises to deliver that are broken time and time again. They need delivery now that is real, that is tangible, that improves their lives, not make it worse. The reality is that so many right now are so busy trying to survive without access to vital services. They're trying to survive without a home. They have needed a government that will hear them so much that they respond effectively, not talk down to them as if they, the government, while I accept they sit in this very important building, this chamber is not the real world. So they need to stop assuming that they know much more and therefore they know better. This is not the case. Those who know best will always be those who are impacted and affected, and they should always be front and centre. That is the duty of care that has been missed, not just in this Dáil term, but historically. Look, the reality is that the vast majority of the public watching today could care less about who sits in that chair, so long as they get the services and the supports that they need. Not a skirting around the edges, such as no referenda in sight to make housing a right for all, no legislation for the right to personal assistance hours and a centralised system. They need recognition of the hardship that they have suffered because that and what they need has not been delivered. We have needed a ban on no-fault evictions yesterday. That was not a big ask, especially considering that we are an outlier in Europe on this matter. A commitment finally to the reinstatement of Ennis Emergency Department, especially in light of the poor management of the so-called reconfiguration. I say that because the necessary and promised resources and funding was not delivered. Ratifying the optional protocol of the UN CRPD, which should have and could have been done on the same day as the already delayed ratification of the UN CRPD way back in 2018. No excuses, no delays. The point that I fear that is being lost on government is the absolute importance and necessity for the public to be able to trust the government, trust the politicians, and by extension, trust government agencies. It is imperative to ensure social cohesion. It was interesting to hear that there is a level of trust in the coalition, but that has not translated to the general population. Will a new Taoiseach, with time constraints and with a job of work to do in rebuilding their own party, prioritise the best interests of the public and prioritise integrity in politics?
Sin deire leis an díospóireacht caiimé níos an ceist a chur agus sí an ceist ná go nánam nóig Dáil Éireann an seacht le Simón ó Harcaí chun na cheapa ag an uachtarán ar Taoiseach. The teachtaí atá thaobhna tairgeanna sin Aberdís tá. Aine atá na coine Aberdís níl, is dóilim go an ceist tréite vótáil.
increase his own prestige and the prestige of his party to drive up votes. I mean, that seems self-explanatory, but it's an important point. He is going to do that by refocusing and rehardening on areas like crime, immigration, small business, standard Fine Gael issues, but very important. To create a situation where he can call an election at the time that best suits him. I saw the Irish Times, Michael, had an article, and it was something like Harris pledges that the government will run its full term. And then when you look at what it actually said, it's like, I would like to run the full term. That is my intention.
Okay, but even before we get there, just to clarify, because I think a lot of people don't understand quite how it is. There are 160 TDs in the Dáil. The government has 80. The opposition has 79. So it is actually, even though nothing has ever felt like a moment of crisis, the way that regularly in the last number of years Tory governments did, which had much bigger majorities because there was the fear of a backbench parade. But it's the numbers that create the opportunity, or indeed the problem, because as it stands, all but I think one of the independents, who constitutes a large part of the opposition, have said that they are going to vote against Harris, right? Now, obviously, all the other parties, like the People Before Profit, Sinn Féin, the Labour Party, Social Democrats, etc., won't vote for him. So, the numbers are there that mean it doesn't even have to be a party. It doesn't have to be the party. It just has to be a few brave, solitary souls ploughing their own furrow, Gary, following their own consciences. And poor old Simon gets the shaft. So, so what is the prospect? Why might some of these brave souls? You're saying Simon is following. Well, he doesn't actually have to do anything, does he? But because it's very hard for him to do anything within this time frame.
Yeah, so Simon will get some level of bounce just from being in New Paris and cleans out the cabinet. Simon Coveney is gone. Simon Coveney has graciously left the stage before being pushed.
Okay.
Helen McEntee looks like she's out of justice, because if you're going to run and you as you said, Michael, you're not going to have a lot of time. You're going to have to do things that make people feel you are taking something seriously.
Yes.
And Helen McEntee in justice is not that. That's just not it.
Just not.
So he will have something from that. There are a couple of large things they could do, which would have an impact. If he can properly embed, if he can properly represent things, then he can draw, I think, a lot of people who would have been traditionally Fianna Fáil votes, which creates an interesting situation where probably the best move for Fianna Fáil as a party, as opposed to a vehicle for Micheál Martin, is to take out Harris at the vote, to refuse to allow him to become Taoiseach on the basis that he's incompetent, and that he's so incompetent he brought down the last government, and that you'll be damned if you're going to do it again.
Yeah, and I think again there's a point worth making, just a slightly technical point about the numbers. If we allow at the moment that Fine Gael are running, we'll call it 20%, right? Imagine the Fine Gael are running at 20% of the polls, and Fianna Fáil are running at 16. Now, even in the face of those numbers, where Fine Gael are ahead, a little bit ahead of Fianna Fáil, right? There is within Fine Gael right now, and has been for a while, a kind of a sense of doom that outside of Dublin that they were just going to get murdified. We have said before that's a possibility. That's a real possibility. They have been tied to a lot of the green policies, which are outside of the cities are seen as being anti-country, anti-agriculture. And therefore, potentially, even though Fianna Fáil might do slightly worse because they have the incumbents and Fine Gael lack the incumbents, that'll lead to a depressing effect on the vote. That in the end, it could end up that Fine Gaelers being eliminated will end up voting Fianna Fáilers who might in other circumstances not be elected. If we get a Harris response, Gary, right? Say he comes out and he says all sorts of lovely things. For example, I am confidently expecting we will hear some very strong language about crime.
We've already started to hear some very strong language about crime. And it's strongly suspected that at the Ardèche that's happening this weekend, there's going to be further announcements on crime. They've clearly recognised it as an issue they're weak in.
We're hearing words about building a prison, Gary.
Things that sound like perhaps people shouldn't be getting bail. Like out there stuff.
It's old-fashioned Fine Gael law and order stuff, which I think there's a hunger for. I think we're going to start hearing all sorts of new language about borders and migration. We may even see the odd large plane being chartered and some young men from Georgia being advised the time has come back to go back to Georgia. So there are things he can do that will be performative, but will send a message, and a message I think that there's going to be a considerable appetite for. So, and on top of that, they'll get a buzz. The problem for Fianna Fáil is that if that gap between the two starts to really grow, that instead of being Fianna Fáil benefiting from a problem that Fine Gael is experiencing at the local level, say because of incumbency or whatever, if that gap starts to grow and the Fine Gaelers, because even if every election is local, if there's a strong wind blowing at a national level, it's very hard to resist it. So if Fine Gael starts to do better and start to widen that gap, that means that the Fine Gaelers are going to be the ones who are going to be ahead on the first preference, and it'll be the Fianna Fáilers who are going to be staring down the barrel of elimination to elect the Fine Gaelers. And there are a lot of guys out there whose seats are far from safe. I mean, they're okay, but they're not doing brilliant. And what they are going to be asked to do, it seems to me, Gary, is simply this. They're being told, okay, we're going to be the responsible people. We're going to make sure that this government continues all the way down to the end. But there's two things, Gary, what are there not? First of all the way down to the end is probably not much more than 7 months. And what guarantee do they have in Fianna Fáil that Harris doesn't throw in a month of pyrotechnics and then goes and runs for the country? Maybe. I mean, it seems bizarre to me. You I think it's more possible than I do. But goes for the country in June. What does that do for Fianna Fáil? Or more to the point, for the Fianna Fáil TD, who doesn't really give a damn about what Micheál Martin does or doesn't want. But he wants to keep his seat.
Here's what I would say on that, and whether or not I think it's more likely. Harris is very difficult to predict. I think his incentives have changed. Now he's Taoiseach. I don't think you can go on a lot of his past behaviour. I know certain parties are advising him that is what he should do. And to be honest, if I was advising him myself, that is probably what I would advise him to do. To go in, make some broad spectacles, to use the fact that so many of your TDs are not sitting, to hide the fact that you are starting to very aggressively go through selection processes and pushing new candidates out all across the country.
Yeah.
To basically try and mitigate the fact that you're going to have a bad day because so many of your people aren't running again. Keep it going, say the right words, and then at the smallest amount of distance that you legally have to notify people, pull the election out from under them. Basically to bring them down and to ameliorate some of your issues. So that's 3 weeks. So the thing there is that if Harris listens to the people who are saying that, and he's capable of it, Fianna Fáil will not know a moment of peace until the actual election, because he can do it at any time. He can just go to the president and seek the dissolution of the government.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said he's and the core of that is he is unpredictable. I don't think that they really will have a strong sense of this man to any great degree more than the people outside. I think that he's going to be unpredictable, and that's going to be deeply uncomfortable for them.
No. I mean, then you also have, if we look at Sinn Féin, in the week since the referendum, Sinn Féin has come out and said it will not run the referendum again, despite the fact it said so. It has come out against the hate speech laws. It has come out against the EU Migration Pact on the ground of national sovereignty. There was talk of repatriating failed asylum seekers. Now, they did that in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Because they obviously looked at that and went, we were told that was going to be popular. The people who told us that was going to be popular, what else have they told us was going to be popular?
Sinn Féin have been learning all sorts of new words. I mean, it's impressive language apprehension.
But that's the other thing, and this affects both Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. Sinn Féin are well organised and they're willing to make these movements. If they think something is unpopular, they will go against it.
The question is that Dáil Éireann nominates Deputy Simon Harris for appointment by the President to be Taoiseach, and on that question a division has been challenged. Tellers Thaw, Deputy Hildegard Naughton and Deputy Cormac Devlin, Neil, Deputy Pádraig McLaughlin and Deputy Matty McGrath.
Deputy James Brown. Deputy Barry Butler.
Deputy Thomas Byrne. Deputy Jackie Cahill. Deputy Derek Cleary. Deputy Jack Chambers. Deputy Niall Collins. Deputy Barry Cowan. Deputy Cathal Crowe. Deputy Cormac Devlin. Deputy Stephen Donnelly. Deputy Joe Flaherty. Deputy Sean Fleming. Deputy Norma Foley. Deputy Sean Haughey. Deputy John Lahart. Deputy James Lawless. Deputy Micheál Martin. Deputy Paul McAuliffe. Deputy Charlie McConalogue. Deputy Michael McGrath. Deputy John McGuinness. Deputy Andreas Moynihan. Deputy Michael Moynihan. Deputy Jennifer Monan O'Connor. Deputy Eamon O'Keefe. Deputy Dara O'Brien. Deputy Jim O'Callaghan. Deputy James O'Connor. Deputy Willie O'Dea. Deputy Christopher O'Sullivan. Deputy Pádraig O'Sullivan. Deputy Anne Rabbitt. Deputy Brendan Smith. Deputy Niamh Smith. Deputy Robert Troy. Deputy Colin Brophy. Deputy Richard Bruton. Deputy Colin Burke. Deputy Peter Burke. Deputy Kieran Cannon. Deputy Joe Carey. Deputy Jennifer Carroll McNeil. Deputy Simon Coveney. Deputy Michael Creed. Deputy Alan Dillon. Deputy Pascal Donoghue. Deputy Bernard Durkin. Deputy Damien English. Deputy Alan Farrell. Deputy Frankie Feehan. Deputy Charles Flanagan. Deputy Brendan Griffin. Deputy Simon Harris. Deputy Martin Hayden. Deputy Emer Higgins. Deputy Heather Humphreys. Deputy Paul Keogh. Deputy Josephine Madigan. Deputy Helen McEntee. Deputy Joe McHugh. Deputy Hildegard Naughton. Deputy Kieran O'Donnell. Deputy Patrick O'Donovan. Deputy Fergus O'Dowd. Deputy John Paul Phelan. Deputy Neil Richmond. Deputy Michael Ring. Deputy David Stanton. Deputy Leo Varadkar. Deputy Patrick Costello. Deputy Francis Noel Duffy. Deputy Nessa Hurrigan. Deputy Brian Ledden. Deputy Catherine Martin. Deputy Stephen Matthews. Deputy Malcolm Noonan. Deputy Marco Kohasik. Deputy Joe O'Brien. Deputy Roderick O'Gorman. Deputy Eamon Ryan. Deputy Oisin Smith.
Bob Brigham.
Deputy John Brady. Deputy Martin Brown. Deputy Pat Buckley. Deputy Matt Carthy. Deputy Circa Clark. Deputy Rose Conway Walsh. Deputy Rada Cronin. Deputy Sean Crowe. Deputy David Cullinan. Deputy Pa Daly. Deputy Pierce Doherty. Deputy Paul Donnelly. Deputy Desi Ellis. Deputy Mairead Farrell. Deputy Kathleen Funchion. Deputy Thomas Gold. Deputy Johnny Quirk. Deputy Martin Kenny. Deputy Claire Curran. Deputy Pádraig McLaughlin. Deputy Mary Lou MacDonald. Deputy Denise Mitchell. Deputy Imelda Munster. Deputy Johnny Mytham. Deputy Owen O'Brien. Deputy Donnacha O'Leary. Deputy Rory O'Murco. Deputy Angus O'Snuddig. Deputy Louise O'Reilly. Deputy Darren O'Rourke. Deputy Maurice Quinlivan. Deputy Patricia Ryan. Deputy Brian Stanley. Deputy Pauline Tully. Deputy Mark Ward. Deputy Vada Bacik. Deputy Brendan Howland. Deputy Alan Kelly. Deputy Jed Nash. Deputy Aon O'Riordan. Deputy Sean Sherlock. Deputy Duncan Smith. Deputy Holly Kearns. Deputy Gary Gannon. Deputy Catherine Murphy. Deputy Keane O'Callaghan. Deputy Roisin Shortall. Deputy Jennifer Whitmore. Deputy Mick Barry. Deputy Richard Boyd Barrett. Deputy Gino Kenny. Deputy Paul Murphy. Deputy Breed Smith. Deputy Carl Berry. Deputy Sean Canny. Deputy Peter Fitzpatrick. Deputy Noel Grealish. Deputy Michael Lowry. Deputy Verona Murphy. Deputy Dennis Naughton. Deputy Matt Shanahan. Deputy Peadar Tobin. Deputy Michael Collins. Deputy Danny Healy-Rae. Deputy Michael Healy-Rae. Deputy Matty McGrath. Deputy Carol Nolan. Deputy Richard O'Donoghue. Deputy Joan Collins. Deputy Catherine Connolly. Deputy Michael Fitzmaurice. Deputy Marion Harkin. Deputy Michael McNamara. Deputy Thomas Pringle. Deputy Mark McSherry. Deputy Violet Ann Wynne.
Yeah, I think they're counting up the votes there. Let's leave Grip playing in the background. No. It looks like those two people at the desk in front of the Concordia are busy tallying up votes. Yeah, here we go. No. Did all our lads vote the way they're supposed to? The whips are down, checking the names. They'll probably just have to sign it off. There we go. A tight win. A narrow victory.
Nish current vote sin that Dáil Éireann nominates Deputy Simon Harris for appointment by the President, the Taoiseach. Result: Tá 88, Neil 69. I confirm, therefore,
There you go. A few of the independents who had said earlier that they weren't going to vote for him, obviously crossed the floor, presumably did some sort of a deal was done. So I'll sign off for now. I enjoyed being back in the seat.
Fan a cheapathe ag an uachtarán mar Taoiseach. I just want to formally welcome the members of the Harris family to the Distinguished Visitors Gallery. You're all very welcome.
Okay. Yeah, as I say, enjoyed that. Refreshing how to run these things, having a chat, increasing my knowledge of the players, increasing my knowledge of the numbers. It's a numbers game, and we would do well not to forget that. Okay, Slán.